The hall seals for the reading, and nothing gets in or out until the passage ends. That is the whole point of it. Velora had watched it happen 11 times from the same place on the observation balcony behind the same sheet of glass, and it had never once mattered. It mattered now because there was a human sitting on the floor of her rendering hall, eating out of the vessel, and she could not reach him. She had her palms flat on the glass. Below her, the single amber light plate hung on its 4 chains and threw its circle onto the stone, and everything outside that circle was grey. The clay vessel stood in the middle of the light. The man sat beside it with his legs stretched out and his jacket sleeve pushed to the elbow and his hand going into the vessel and back to his mouth at a steady, unhurried rate. Elarun stood at the slab with the right scroll open across both palms and his back 3/4 turned to the man and his voice moving through the passage. He could not stop. That was also the point of it. A custodian who breaks the passage voids the passage, and a voided passage is a voided sentence, and there is no provision anywhere in the record for reading it twice. So Elarun read, and the human ate, and Velora stood behind the glass with the seal indicator burning steady above the door and counted. She counted because it was the only useful thing available to her. 4, when she first looked up from the ledger desk and understood what she was seeing. 5. 6. He was not rushing. He took one, looked at it, ate it, and rested his hand on his knee for a moment before he took another, and somewhere around the 5th, his eyes had started to run, and he had wiped them on the back of his wrist and kept going. Elarun reached the middle of the passage. The words came up through the floor grill the way they always did. The instrument is whole, and the instrument is untouched. It is not cut. It is not heated. It is not mixed with any other thing. It passes from the terrace to the vessel, and from the vessel to the mouth, and nothing stands between. Velora had heard that line 11 times, and had never had a reason to think about it. She thought about it now, watching a stranger take the 9th one out of the bowl. The interdiction is older than the rite. Skarn is not studied, it is not cut open, it is not dried, it is not ground, it is not put into anything or taken out of anything. It grows on one terrace under one keeper, and it is counted twice a cycle, and it goes into the vessel whole, and it is used once. And the reason no Elarun in the recorded history of the species had ever put a skarn pod into a pan was not that it had not occurred to them. It was that it was the single most forbidden thing a person of that species could do with their hands. The human was eating them out of a bowl with his fingers. Elarun turned a fold of the scroll. Below the light, the man leaned forward and looked into the vessel and reached in further, and Velora put the flat of her hand against the seal panel and got the same answer she had got the last 4 times, which was that the panel was dead until the closing line. He shifted. She lost him behind the curve of the vessel for a moment, and when he came back into view, his hand was empty and moving toward his chest. She marked it and did not have time to think about it, because Elarun had reached the end. The rite of ending is complete, and the vessel is empty, and the condemned is released from the record. The seals opened. Velora was through the balcony door and down the stairs before the indicator had finished changing color. The hall was warmer than the balcony, and it smelled faintly of something that had never been in it before. Elarun had turned around. He was standing at the slab with the scroll still open in his hands, and he had not moved since the last word, and his leaf appendages lay flat and rigid along both forearms. "There is a person in the hall," he said. "I know." "There was a person in the hall for the entire passage." "I know that also." The human got up. He did it easily, one hand on the rim of the vessel, and he came up to his full height and turned around, and Velora had to adjust her estimate of what she was dealing with. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, dark hair pushed back off a straight brow, a jaw shadowed with stubble, 2 hazel eyes that were streaming steadily down both sides of his face and that he was paying no attention to at all. Canvas work jacket with the collar up, scuffed boots, a satchel across his chest. "Sorry," he said. "Was that for me, or was I supposed to wait?" Elarun set the scroll down on the slab and pressed both hands onto it and said nothing whatsoever. "Your name," Velora said. "Connor. I'm on the manifest. I'm waiting on a signature. Guy at the dock told me the office was straight through and not to turn left." He looked around the hall as if noticing it for the first time. I turned right. There was a room with a table and a bowl on it and nobody in it, and then a lot of doors shut at once and a fella came in and started reading, so I sat down and kept quiet. You sat down and kept quiet, Valora repeated. Seemed rude to interrupt. He rubbed the back of his neck. And I'd already started. Valora walked past him to the vessel and looked into it. It was empty. She had known it would be. She crouched and ran her hand across the stone around its base and came up with what she was expecting, which was a small scatter of stems. She laid them out on the rim of the vessel in a line while the human watched her do it. 8, she said. That sounds about right. You consumed 8. If that's what the count says. He said it agreeably. I wasn't keeping score. What are they? Elaroon spoke without lifting his head. They are the instrument of our capital right. Connor's expression changed by a degree. Not much. Enough. Say that again. The vessel is filled once for each sentence, Valora said. It is filled from the vault and it is carried into this hall, and the passage is read over it, and then the condemned is brought up from the lower level and takes one. One is sufficient. That is the entire mechanism of capital punishment on this station, and you have just eaten it off the floor of a sealed room, while the custodian was reading it into the record. There was a long moment where nobody said anything, and the only sound in the hall was the air moving in the ceiling vents. There's a person downstairs, Connor said. Yes. In a cell, right now, waiting. Yes. He looked at the empty vessel. He had gone very still, and the easy set had come out of his shoulders, and for the first time since the seals had opened, he seemed to be somewhere other than pleasantly confused. What's their name? Valora had not expected the question and did not have a policy for it. That is not information I give to a witness. I'm not a witness. I just ate the man's sentence. He turned and looked at her directly, and his eyes were still streaming, and his voice had gone flat and careful. I've been on a haul for 9 days. I walked into a room that had food in it, and I ate it, and I was pleased with myself about it. Now you're telling me there's somebody sat downstairs whose whole situation just changed because I was hungry. He shook his head slowly. So yeah, I'd like the name. Elaroon lifted his head. Carrison, he said. Custodian. He is entitled to have it said. Elaroon rolled the scroll and clamped it under one arm. Warden, I am taking the scroll to the archive, and I am going to read the interdiction and the passage side by side until I understand what has happened here, because I do not care to stand in this hall while I fail to. He walked out. He did not hurry. He had been reading capital rights for 6 years, and his hands did not shake, and it was only when he had gone that Valora noticed the flat, rigid set of his leaves had not changed once since the seals opened. The doorway darkened. Abissar had come up from the lower level and stopped at the threshold and did not come in. 6.5 feet of dark navy and charcoal, streamlined, silent, with 2 enormous black eyes that were moving independently. One was on Connor. One was on the vessel. The blue cyan markings along his lateral ridges were low and steady. Connor looked at him for a moment and then, sensibly, looked back at Valora. That's the containment officer, he said. Isn't it? Yes. He's here for the fella downstairs. He was. Abissar did not move. He had been standing by that door for 11 renderings with nothing to do, and he had come up expecting the 12th and had found a stranger and an empty bowl, and the fact that he had stopped at the threshold rather than crossing, it was the only reason this conversation was still happening in words. He does not speak, Valora said. Do not take that as an absence of opinion. Wasn't going to. The physician's bay was 3 doors down, and small enough that the scanner arch took up most of it. A light strip ran along the floor and threw green up the walls to the knee. Zyphera was already at the console when they came in with the counting slate hooked at her belt because she had come straight from the vault and had not put it down since the vessel was filled. She looked at Connor for about 2 seconds. Her skin ran a single band of white across the shoulders and settled. Sit under the arch, she said. He sat. She worked. Valora stood with her back to the door because there was nowhere else in the room to stand. He consumed 8, Valora said. Confirmed by stem count. 8. Zyphora did not look up. Then he should have been finished before the 4th. He is not finished. I can see that he is not finished. I am telling you that the number is impossible. The arch clicked. It sparked once at the upper joint and fed the readout strip out backwards, and Zyphora caught it before it hit the floor and turned it the right way up and read it twice. Toxin load consistent with multiple fatal doses. Organ function nominal. Cardiac rhythm elevated. Core temperature elevated. Continuous ocular discharge. She lowered the strip. It has flagged him as a hazard and as being in good health at the same time, and it cannot resolve the two, and neither can I. I feel all right, Connor said. His voice had come out slightly wrong, and he cleared his throat. Bit rough? Not dying? You should be dying. Yeah, I'm getting that. He wiped his eyes on his wrist. For what it's worth, I've had worse. There's a crop out of the southern belt back home that'll strip the lining off your throat. Same shape of pain. This one's cleaner. Zyphora put the strip down. Explain that, she said. Explain what? You compared it to something. Do that again slowly. Connor looked mildly surprised to be taken seriously. I haul agricultural. That's my whole run. Perishables, seed stock, cured goods for a preservation co-op back home. 9 days out and 9 back, and most of what's in my cart right now is glass and salt. He shrugged. You spend enough time moving crops that burn, you learn what they do. That's not clever. That's just the job. Velora watched Zyphora go entirely still at the console and understood that something had just happened in the room that she herself had not caught. Warden, Zyphora said, a word outside. Say it here. Then I will say it plainly. Zyphora turned around. He has told us he is a man who handles crops that burn professionally for a living, and he has eaten 8, and he is sitting up. Those two facts are not separate facts. I do not yet know how they connect, but I am not prepared to stand here and pretend they are a coincidence. Connor put his hand up slightly. Can I ask a stupid question? You may ask it. What do you do with them, before? Do you dry them, salt them, anything? No, Zyphora said. Nothing at all? Nothing at all, ever, by anyone. She held his eyes with both of hers and did not blink. The instrument is not cut, it is not heated, it is not mixed with any other thing. That is not a preference. That is interdiction. It is older than the rite, and a person of the custodian species would sooner open their own wrist than put one of those in a pan. We do not know what happens when you process a scan pod because in the entire history of this station, nobody has been permitted to find out. Connor was quiet. Right, he said. Does that mean something to you? It means something to me. He rubbed the back of his neck and did not elaborate, and Velora filed the pause and the gesture together and kept them. Zyphora unhooked the counting slate from her belt. Warden, she said, the scan does not tell me what happened to him, and it will not tell me tonight. There is one number in this station that will tell us something, and it is mine, and I want to go and get it now. The vessel count. The vessel count. The vault ran cold and white, and the light in it was flat enough to make everyone look worse than they were. Jars sat in racks, floor to ceiling along both walls, with the terrace seals intact on all of them but one. Iron tongs hung on hooks by the door. Zyphora worked with the slate braced against the rack and read out as she went, because the count is read aloud in the vault, always, so that the number exists in 2 places. Sealed jar. Terrace mark intact when I broke it. Contents 20. She turned the slate. I broke it myself, and I counted 20 into the vessel, and I carried the vessel to the hall, and I set it under the light, and I logged 20, and I left the hall before the seals engaged. That is my line, and it will hold up in any review anyone cares to run. 20 into the vessel? 20? Velora set the stems down on the shelf in front of her. She had brought them from the hall wrapped in the fold of her coat because she had already understood, somewhere between the physician's bay and here, that they were going to be the most important objects on the station. 8 stems on the floor, she said. I counted them in front of him and he did not dispute the number. 8 consumed. 8 consumed. The vessel is empty. Zyphora stopped writing. The cold moved in the room, and neither of them said the thing for several seconds because they were both competent, and the competent part of the job is the part where you check your own arithmetic before you say something out loud that cannot be taken back. 12, Sci-Fi said. 12. 12 pods left that vessel and did not go into him and are not on the floor of your hall. She set the slate flat on the shelf. I swept that floor with my own hands before I logged the vessel, and there is nothing under the slab and nothing behind the urn and nothing in the drain. They are not in the hall. They are not in this vault. And the seals were shut, so they did not leave the room while he was in it. Velora stood very still in the cold white light and went back over the balcony, her palms on the glass. The man in the circle of amber taking one, looking at it, eating it, resting his hand on his knee. 6, 7, 8. Leaning forward and reaching further into the bowl and coming back up with his hand empty and moving toward his chest, not toward his mouth. Archivist, she said, where is the human now? Physician's bay, where you left him. And his cart. Sci-Fi looked up. His cart is in the docking corridor, she said slowly, where it has been since he arrived, with 9 days of glass and salt on it. Velora was already at the door. Seal the corridor, she said. The docking corridor ran 200 paces from the hall to the outer locks, and the light in it came from red strips at ankle height, which made the deck look wet and made everyone's legs look borrowed. Connor's freight cart stood halfway along it with crates strapped down under cargo netting and a hand lamp clipped to the frame. He was standing beside it when they came down the corridor. He had not been told to, and he had not run. Corridor's sealed, he said. There's a fella at the far lock who looked at me and I decided I'd stay where I was. That is the containment officer, Velora said. Figured. Abissar had come in behind her without a sound and stopped 4 paces short of the cart. He did not approach it. His lateral ridges held a low, steady cyan, and both of his enormous black eyes were on Connor's hands. 12 pods left that vessel and did not go into you, Velora said. Do not tell me you do not know where they are. I was on the balcony. I watched your hand come out of the bowl empty and go to your chest. Connor did not argue. He pulled the satchel strap over his head and held it out flat on both palms. 2 are in there. Whole. He nodded at the cart. The rest are in a jar in the second crate. A jar. A jar. She took the satchel. Inside, wrapped in a fold of glove liner, were 2 scarn pods, unbroken and untouched, with the terrace bloom still on the skin. Why? Because I was 9 days out and I've got 9 days back, and there was a bowl of something in a room that nobody was in. He said it evenly. Where I'm from, a bowl on a table in an open room is for whoever walks past it. I took some for the road. That's the whole of it. I'd have done the same with bread. And the jar. That's the job. He crouched and unhooked the netting from the second crate and stopped with his hand on the lid because Abissar had moved. It was not fast. That was the unsettling part. He crossed the 4 paces without weight in it and put one hand flat on the crate lid, and his 4 elongated fingers spread across the wood, and he looked at Connor until Connor took his own hand away. He will open it, Velora said. Abissar lifted the lid. Inside, packed in straw, sat a wide glass jar with a screw seal. Cheap glass, the kind that came free with something else. It held a heavy amber liquid, and in the liquid, suspended and slowly turning as the crate settled, were 10 scarn pods gone soft and dark at the edges. Velora crouched down beside it and did not touch it. What is in that jar? Rendered fat, mostly. Bit of salt, some of the pod oil that's come out of them by now. Connor sat back on his heels. It's called a hot pack. Burn crop comes in off the terraces green, and it's no good to anyone in that state, so you put it down in fat for a day and it stabilizes and travels. I run for a preservation co-op. That's the whole reason I'm on this route. I've got a cab full of glass and salt because that's what I do for a living. You made this on my station. I made it in my cab in about 10 minutes while I was waiting on a signature. He shrugged, and there was nothing defensive in it, which somehow made it worse. I didn't think about it. It's what you do with a crop that burns. It's like asking why I put the netting back on. Velora looked at the jar for a long moment. Archivist, she said into her collar. Physician's bay. Bring the tongs. The bay was small and green from the knee down, and the scanner arch still had a burn mark at the upper joint from where it had sparked. Zephora had the jar on the console in a containment cradle and had not opened it. Her counting slate lay beside it with the vessel line still on the face of it. "You are going to want to sit," she said. "I am going to stand. Then stand and listen carefully, because there are two findings, and the second one is worse than the first." Zephora turned the readout toward her. "The first is why he is alive. I have the scan from the arch, and I have the terrace assay from the vault, and I have put them beside each other, and the answer is not that he is strong, and it is not that he is lucky." "Then what?" "Scan does not work on him." She said it flatly. "The compound binds to a channel in the nerve tissue. Every species on this station carries that channel. The custodian's people carry it, mine carry it, yours carries it, the containment officer's carries it. He does not. His nerve tissue reads the compound as heat and pain and produces water at the eyes and nothing else, because there is nothing in him for it to lock onto." Valora took that in. He was never in danger. He was in a great deal of discomfort and no danger whatsoever. He has spent the last hours believing he was being brave. Zephora paused. "I am not going to be the one to tell him. It is not a poison. It is a poison. It is a very good poison. It is simply not a poison for him." Zephora's skin ran one narrow band of grey across the shoulders and cleared. "That is the first finding, and it is survivable. Here is the second." She turned the cradle so the amber caught the floor light. "The compound is fat-soluble. It has left the pods and gone into the oil, all of it or near enough that the difference does not matter." She let that sit for exactly as long as it needed. "The pods in that jar are inert. I could eat one. The custodian could eat one. What is dangerous now is the liquid they are sitting in, and the liquid is holding what was in 10 of them in a volume I can lift with one hand." The vent moved air through the room and neither of them spoke. 10 doses, Valora said, in a jar with a screw seal that came free with something else, which he made in 10 minutes with fat and salt without knowing what he was doing, and which anyone with a pan and one pod could make on any deck of this station in an afternoon. Zephora set both hands flat on the console. "Warden. For as long as anyone has been alive, the scan pod has been controlled because it was singular. One pod, one use, one vessel, one keeper, one terrace. That control was never about locks. It was about the fact that nobody could make more of it or carry it or hide it or put it in something else. And now a freight hauler has done all 4 by accident. By habit, Zephora said, which is considerably worse." The archive smelled of dust and cold paper, and Elarun had 3 versions of the passage open across the long table, with the oldest one weighted flat at both ends. He had been in there for hours. His leaf appendages lay flat along both forearms and had not lifted once since the seals opened in the hall, and Valora had known him long enough to understand that this was not shock anymore. It was concentration. "I have found what I went looking for," he said. "You will not enjoy it. Nobody has enjoyed anything since the passage ended. Say it." "The interdiction." He turned the oldest sheet around. "We are taught it as reverence. The instrument is whole. It is not cut, it is not heated, it is not mixed with any other thing. It is recited as a sacrament, and my office has treated it as one for as long as the office has existed. And in the oldest hand it is not a sacrament. It is an instruction with a reason attached, and the reason has been dropped from every copy made since." He put one finger on the line and read it out. "It shall not be cut, nor warmed, nor laid in fat, nor in oil, for what is drawn out is not lost but gathered, and what is gathered may be carried, and a thing that may be carried may be given to any mouth." Valora read it herself. She read it twice. "Laid in fat," she said, "named specifically, before oil, before anything else." Elarun sat back. The first custodian knew exactly what happens when you put a scan pod in fat, knew it well enough to name the method and to understand the consequence, and chose to write a prohibition instead of a procedure, and let 4 generations of my office recite the prohibition without ever being told what it was for. They buried it. They buried it, and it stayed buried, because the interdiction worked. He looked up. It worked perfectly. It worked so well that when a man walked in from a freight lock with no idea what any of it meant, he did the forbidden thing in 10 minutes, in a cab, on his way to collect a signature. Valora put her hand flat on the table. Custodian, the sentence. That is the second thing. Elaroon straightened the pages. The passage requires the instrument to pass from the vessel to the mouth with nothing standing between. It is explicit. The 2 pods in his satchel are untouched and would satisfy it. The 10 in the jar would not, and neither would the oil, and I will not read the passage over either of them. So the sentence can be carried out. Lawfully. Today. With one of the 2. He said it without any weight at all, which was how she knew what it had cost him. That is the answer to the question you asked me, and I am obliged to give it to you accurately. And the answer you did not give me. Elaroon was quiet for a moment. The rendering is finished, he said. Not today, and not by us. The authority of the right rested on the instrument being uncontrollable by anyone but the terrace. That is gone. It went the moment a stranger made 10 doses out of a bowl of it with a jar he did not pay for. Any review board that reads what is on this table will reach the same place I have reached, and they will reach it whether or not we hang a man first. The hall had been aired, and the vessel had been taken away, and the amber light plate threw its circle onto stone that was, for the first time in Valora's service, entirely empty at the center. Connor stood at the edge of the light with his hands in his jacket pockets. His eyes had stopped running about an hour ago. Elaroon stood at the slab with the oldest sheet from the archive still in his hand. Valora told him all of it. She did it plainly and in order, and she did not soften the part about the channel. He took the first finding better than she expected. He laughed once, without much in it, and rubbed the back of his neck. So I sat in your ceremony crying for an hour over what amounts to a hot dinner. Yes. And the fella downstairs. For him it is 1 pod, and it is over in under a minute. It has always been 1 pod. She kept her voice level. That is what you were eating. He went quiet then. She watched it land properly, which took a few seconds, and she saw the easy set go out of his shoulders the way it had gone in the first hour, only further this time and lower down. Say the rest of it, he said. The jar. The jar holds what was in 10 of them. It is concentrated, and it is portable, and it is sealed with a screw top. Valora let that stand. The archivist can lift it in one hand. That is 10 deaths on your cart, and you made it on a break, and the only reason it is not sitting in a cargo hold on its way to a port right now is that we counted the vessel. Connor looked at the empty circle of light on the stone for a long time. I've moved burn crop for 6 years, he said finally. There's a protocol for the hot pack, sealed store, marked crate, signed off both ends. Nobody handles it who hasn't done the course. I've filled in the form so many times I could do it asleep. He shook his head slowly. And I made one in the back of my cab out of a bowl I found in a room, and I felt clever about it, and I put the netting back on and went for a walk. You did not know what it was. That's not the bit that's bothering me. He turned around. The bit that's bothering me is that I wouldn't have needed to know. Anybody who does what I do would have done exactly the same thing with anything that came out of that bowl. That's not one careless man. That's every hauler on your dock. Elaroon looked up from the sheet. Say that again, he said. I said your problem isn't the vault. Connor gestured back down the corridor, and there was nothing casual in it. You've got that thing locked in a cold room behind a seal and a counting slate and one archivist who's very good at her job. Fine. But the pods come off a terrace, and somebody carries them from the terrace to the vault, and I'd bet you anything that walk isn't logged the way the vault is, because for 4 generations there was no reason to log it. Nobody could do anything with one. Now one is enough. Lock the terrace, log the walk, and if you've got a co-op anywhere on this station that renders fat, put a name on that too, because that's the other half of what I used and I didn't bring it with me. Nobody said anything. That is correct, Elaroon said. It's not clever. It's the same list I signed at the depot on my first run. Connor pulled the satchel off his shoulder and held it out. Both of these are yours, the jar's yours, and I'll write out the method for you. Full method, quantities, times, everything, including the parts that make it go wrong, because you'd rather have it on a sheet in an archive than find it out from somebody who works it out in a kitchen and doesn't tell you. Valora took the satchel. You understand what you are handing us. I understand I'm handing you the thing your first custodian tried to make sure nobody ever wrote down. He nodded at the sheet in Elaroon's hand. He got 4 generations out of it. That's not nothing, but he was betting nobody would ever walk in from outside, and somebody did, and it was me, and I was hungry. He let out a breath. You can't unring it. Best you can do is be the ones holding the paper. Elaroon folded the oldest sheet closed. Warden, he said, I will not read the passage, not with one of the two, not today, not while what is on that table is unreviewed. If that costs me the office, it costs me the office. It will not cost you the office, Valora said, because I am suspending the sentence myself and putting my name on the suspension, which will cost me a great deal more. Connor looked between them. Does that mean? It means he is not dying today. She said it carefully because she was not going to lie to him after everything else. It means the instrument's standing is in question and no sentence can be completed while it is. There will be a review and it will run 200 days and it may return him to the record and it may not. I am not able to promise you a better answer than that. Connor nodded slowly. He's still down there. He is still down there, and he has been told, and by every account he sat down when they told him. Valora paused. His name is Carrison. You asked for it, so you may as well have the rest. The outer lock was quiet, and the red strips made the deck look wet all over again. The cart had a fresh net on it. It was carrying 9 days of empty glass and 1 crate fewer than it had come in with, and a manifest with a station seal on it that Valora had signed against the flat of the cart. Your co-op, she said. How many haulers? About 40. Why? Because the terrace will keep producing for 200 days whatever the review decides, and it will need to be moved and stored by somebody who does not have to be told twice what a sealed store is. She handed him the slate. That is a trial contract, 1 run. It is conditional on the review, it is conditional on the method sheet you have promised me, and it names your co-op and not you, because you are a hauler and not a chemist, and I am not going to make you into one. That's fair. It is also the only thing about this that will look reasonable in writing, so I would like you to sign it before anyone senior arrives. Connor signed it. His handwriting was terrible. He got the last strap tight and turned toward the lock and stopped because Abyssar was standing in it. He had made no sound arriving. He never did. The blue cyan along his lateral ridges was low and steady, and both of his enormous black eyes were on Connor at once, which, after everything else, was somehow the most direct thing anyone had done to him all day. He had stood at that hall door for 6 years waiting for a man to resist, and today he had come up the stairs and found a stranger and an empty bowl, and had spent the hours since standing 4 paces from a crate with his hand flat on the lid. Connor put his hand out. Abyssar looked at it. He looked at it for long enough that Valora considered saying something and decided not to. Then he reached out with 4 elongated fingers and took it once and let go and stepped back out of the lock and stood aside, and that was the entire conversation, and it was more than he had given anyone on that station in 6 years. Connor put one hand on the cart and paused. Can I ask you something? You have asked me nothing else since you arrived. The 2 in the bag. He nodded back down the corridor. You're keeping them whole, for the review? Yes. Right. He rubbed the back of his neck. Then don't put them in the same room as anything that renders. Not the same room, not the same deck. It's not the heat that does it. It's the fat. Valora looked at him for a moment. Noted, she said. Take your cart, Connor. Turn left.